Hello, welcome to Z Marie Design. Let's create a 4-square quilt block, and with just a few cuts, I'll show you how to create a disappearing 4-patch quilt block. So we'll start out with 4 squares of fabric. Mine measure 6.5 by 6.5. I'm going to put them right sides facing, and I will sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance down one side. After I've sewn my 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm going to press to the dark side, to the dark fabric on each of these blocks, making sure not to stretch the fabric. So lifting my iron up and down, press to the dark. Then I'm going to put these right sides facing. I'll put the 2 darkest fabrics opposite and the 2 lightest fabrics opposite. And I'm going to put them right sides facing, making sure to nest my seams. One seam goes to the right, one seam goes to the left. I'm going to insert my pin through one seam, making sure it comes out the other seam. Pin everything in place. And then I'll take this to the machine and I'll sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now that my 1/4 inch seam allowance is sewn, I'm going to set my seam and I'm going to press my 2 blocks up. And now we have our 4-patch quilt block. Measures 12.5 by 12.5. Now with just a few cuts, we're going to create a disappearing 4-patch. So I'm going to place my ruler and I'm going to place the 1.5 inch line on the center seam, and I'm going to do a cut. And without lifting my block, I'm going to just rotate my mat 180 degrees. I'm going to again place my ruler, the 1.5 inch mark on the center seam, and do a second cut. And without touching my block or moving it, I'm going to rotate my mat again 180 degrees, placing my 1.5 inch ruler mark on that center seam and making sure everything lines up at the top and the bottom. I'll make another cut, rotating my mat once again without lifting my block. Place my ruler on the 1.5 inch seam on the center line, making sure that everything lines up on the top and the bottom. Make another cut. And now I've made 2 cuts horizontally. I've made 2 cuts vertically. This is what it should look like. You have your corner squares, side squares, vertical squares, and 1 square in the middle. Now I'm going to start by removing that block that's in the 12 o'clock. I'll move it to the 3 o'clock. The one that's in the 3 o'clock, I'll move it to the 6 o'clock. The one that's in the 6 o'clock, I'll move to the 9, and the 9 o'clock, I'll move up to the 12. Next, I'm going to sew these patches back together. I will sew right sides facing, the first patch to the second to the third. That's row 1. The same thing on row 2. And the same thing on row 3. And just right sides facing, I'm sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I have each of my rows sewn. I'm going to now sew them right sides facing. I will start with the top row and sew it right sides facing to the second row, and then sew that 3rd block to the 2nd block. So I have the 1st row sewn to the 2nd row, and now I'll sew my 3rd row to that unit. Now when I sew this and I press everything, When I'm sewing, I'm making sure that all of my seam allowances are matching. And then I'm going to create my disappearing 4 patch. And this is what your units should look like. Now, depending on your dark and light fabrics, your units will look a little bit different, have a bit more contrast than mine does, but it's the same process. My unit now measures 11 inches by 11 inches, and making sure that I am matching those seam allowances when I sew. And these are some of the blocks that I created using this disappearing 4 patch technique. And this is a great way to change the look of just a basic 4 patch quilt block. So I hope you like this technique, and I hope you'll give it a try. Thanks for watching.